Welcome everybody to another episode of Lazio Lounge. I'm Vittorio Campanile. With me, Scottish man in Rome, I will call you from now on. Alistair McKenzie, how are you?
It's a very accurate description. I'm okay. Would have liked to be in a bit better of a mood today, to be honest, after last night's game. But it is nice, if I'm honest, to have Serie A back underway and to be back in the stadium last night as well.
Yeah, it was good to have 24 hours to rest and analyze better the match of Lazio yesterday against Napoli. Before we start, I want to point out two things. One is, obviously, if you're doing this, it's because we are Lazio fans, but at the same time we are journalists. So we try to analyze the match clearly without letting our heart say too much, but thinking with the mind and as a journalist experience. And the other one is we are not pro Lotito or against Lotito. We analyze what things happens without anything in the background. We praise Lotito for the transfer market as we criticize for Caicedo position. So if you're looking for a website pro Lotito, this is not the one. If you're looking for a podcast against Lotito, again, you're wrong. Said this, Alistair, I want to start from Inzaghi's quote in the press conference. He said, Lazio deserve a draw. I don't think so. I think that at the end, Napoli played better and deserved to win. It's true that if Acerbi would have scored at the last minute of the match, it would have been nothing terrible. Just look what happened with Roma today. Torino deserved to win, and then Roma found a goal at the last second with Dzeko and took 3 points. So, this is football. Things like this can happen, but you have to be honest and say that Napoli played better than Lazio and at the end deserved to win. Do you agree with my thought?
Yeah, more or less. I think the disappointment really from a Lazio perspective was the fact that they started so brightly. And I think everyone who was watching the game will have been very encouraged by the manner in which Lazio started the game. It was extremely confident, very assured, looking dangerous. Immobile's goal was absolutely extraordinary, really, leaving 3 defenders behind him with one turn. And at that point, things were looking very positive. Unfortunately, it did actually seem to kind of spark Napoli into life, and from that moment onwards, I would say the balance of the game tipped in their favour. So yeah, I mean, like I was saying to you just before we came on air, I think if you look at it that way, 1/3 of the game Lazio were the better team, and you could say 2/3 of the game Napoli were, so therefore a 2-1 scoreline. It's hard to argue it's not representative with how the flow of the match went. The other point, though, is really an obvious one, given what you've just mentioned, Roma there, and the fact that they were on the back foot a lot today in their game against Torino, still managed to pull out an incredible goal from Dzeko right at the end and get 3 points. I don't think that's something Lazio do enough, to be on the back foot, to be struggling, to be playing badly. I wouldn't say Lazio played badly last night, but I think this team needs to find a way of getting results, getting points with their backs against the wall, which is something that we've not tended to do an awful lot last season, particularly. I think when we're playing badly, we tend to lose the game. And although it is just the first game of the season, there's a chance Napoli will be a rival of ours for Champions League football over the course of the campaign, so it could come back to bite us.
Yeah, I think this is a very valid point. You said correctly, the season has just started. But if you go back to last year as well, I think only against Chievo in the away, Lazio didn't play well but managed to win. Otherwise, every time Lazio won is because they played better than the other team. And Brad Gilbert, former tennis player and a very famous coach, wrote a book, Winning Ugly. And that's a little bit what Lazio not doing, especially if you want to win the league or compete for the Champions League spot. You have to win even when you're not playing that well. And that's something that Lazio is not able to do at the moment. I think even because Lazio, if Milinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto play at their level, Lazio has a lot of chances to win, and usually if they play that well, then usually Lazio play well. So that's probably one of the reasons. One thing I wanted to point out before going to the questions, a lot of questions we received already, is I thought that one of the reasons why Lazio dropped after Immobile scored was the condition of some key players, especially Badel, Milinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto. I thought they played badly after those 30 minutes because they didn't have any more energy.
Yeah, definitely agree with that assessment. I think that in the opening half hour, actually, one of the things I was most encouraged by was the way that Badel was playing, and I was looking at him spraying passes around, controlling the game, breaking up play, and I thought this is fantastic signing for Lazio. I still do believe that, but you're right, it was obvious after that opening half an hour that his condition wasn't at the top. There are certain points in the second half where you would see Napoli coming on the counter-attack, and I'd be looking back over the halfway line trying to find Badel, who's supposed to be covering that space, and he'd still be retreating back. So Inzaghi said it himself, and it's something he talked about in this press conference after the match as well as before the match. So you could tell he was concerned that the condition of some players isn't what he wanted. And like we mentioned in previous podcasts, it is quite unlucky to have so many selection problems in week one between suspensions and injuries. But I think Badel will turn into a fabulous signing, actually, once he does get his top fitness. I think the problem really lay in the likes of Luis Alberto and Milinkovic-Savic in particular, just not showing up for that game. And having had this whole summer of speculation over future, obviously Sergei was the one who's in the press more, but Alberto's future on deadline day was still being discussed with Sevilla coming in with a late offer. So I don't know if that's had any sort of mental impact on the two of them, but they really weren't at their best. If you're talking about, a book called Winning Ugly, I think maybe the Lazio Lounge team, we should come together and put the money towards buying that book and sending it to the team and see how they do, because yesterday I think there was just a sense of desperation. Once we conceded the second goal, the heads went down. There wasn't really the attitude that I saw out there of the players to really think that they were going to get back into the game in a controlled manner. And that's the thing that frustrates me, is that I think Inzaghi's a bit too quick to press the last resort button, or to get a bit desperate in his attempt for a goal. Maybe it's his striker's instinct, but Lazio, he switched to a back four, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and that was actually very encouraging to see the willingness to do that from him. But I think that he has to have a bit more faith in his game plan from the start to be able to get Lazio back into the game that way. And actually, in the end, I think we were quite lucky to not concede a third goal, given how open we were leaving ourselves in the last 20 minutes or so defensively, that we were looking quite ragged towards the end. So for one match, there's all sorts of things to really pick apart.
Yes, it's true. Even let's not forget that Milinkovic-Savic and Badel started training something like 2 weeks ago, so they're far behind the others. And this is very unfortunately, especially when both of them have to play, because we didn't have that many options in the midfield. So I'm not sure. I don't think it's a mental issue. It's simply they didn't have enough time, like all the other players, to get in shape. And same thing about Luis Alberto, who went to Oronzo, but let's not forget that the first week and a half he was trying to recover from the injury of last year. So I hope they're going to pick up the form in the coming weeks. I'm not sure they're going to be fit for Juventus Lazio, which is a concern, even though luckily Lucas Leiva and Lulic will be back. But I don't know. I was looking around internet, social media, and I thought the criticized were, it's just the first match against Napoli. I think fans have become a little bit too harsh,
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think I can understand certain elements of the criticism, though, because, and I think that some of the questions we've had is some of our own listeners who aren't happy with what they saw. And I think the reason for this frustration is really that a whole summer has passed and we've not seen Lazio play competitively now for 3 months. And then we come back, first game of the season, and some of the same problems are still as evident as ever. So I do understand that people might be a bit frustrated about that, but considering what we've already talked about and the fact that we're missing 2 key players who would have started that game in Senad Lulic and Lucas Leiva, they're not just key players in terms of what they provide on the pitch, the quality they provide. It's also the leadership, and I think that should never be understated, really, the importance of that, and particularly when Lazio are in difficult positions. I think you do need those 2 guys on the pitch to actually help guide them through it. You could say, yes, but both those players were on the pitch during our infamous blackouts last season. But be that as it may, they are still, that's the club captain and one of the most experienced players in the squad. So they should be able to provide a bit more balance to the team than what we had yesterday, which was a few players who are completely new to the squads and some guys who, clearly weren't in condition. So, it's a tough start to the season, and playing Napoli at home and losing 2-1 isn't the ideal start. But look, we lost to this team 4-1 both times we played them last season. We've only beaten this team once in 6 years. So losing to Napoli on day one isn't a catastrophic result that's setting us back miles. It's not what we wanted, but I don't think it's pointing to a disastrous season coming up. And I think there are lots of positives as well to be taken out of it, which I'm sure we'll get onto as well.
One thing important is Real Madrid loses matches even with Cristiano Ronaldo. So, it's true that we lost with Lucas Leiva and Lulic last year, but if Real Madrid loses with Cristiano Ronaldo and Barcelona with Messi, then there isn't a player that if he plays, you always win. So you have to get in that mind too. We had a lot
His name is Felipe Caicedo.
Absolutely. One of the things I was thinking yesterday when I was coming back from the stadium was Lazio was down, and then in the last 5 minutes, Cataldi comes in and not Caicedo. Were you surprised about this decision from Simone Inzaghi? Do you think it's a message he's sending, or do you think the situation was that he needed more Cataldi than another striker?
Yeah, I mean, I was quite relieved to see that happen, to be honest, because it didn't appear to me that the formation that he changed the team to was particularly well rehearsed. It was kind of a 4-4-1-1, I think you'd call it. It took me a while to work that out looking at it on the pitch, though. And we spent a lot of time last season pleading with Inzaghi to be more tactically flexible, and he was willing to do that. He brought on Correa, who didn't really have the impact that we might have hoped. But I think in the centre of that midfield, that was a big issue when he made those changes, because Milinkovic-Savic was the player he was pushing further forward to support Immobile, which left Luis Alberto as one of the central midfielders. And by that point, I don't think he had the legs left. I don't think he's basically a player who can play in a midfield too as a central midfielder. And Napoli were very easily really going from one side of the pitch to the other. And so actually to bring on Cataldi, I think, was more a question of restoring some balance to the team tactically, because as a more natural central midfielder, at least he would be able to, give Lazio a platform on which to build their attacks. Because as I mentioned earlier, I think the way that it was before then was too loose and it was a bit desperate. And not only that, but when you're resorting to that tactic, which in my opinion should only really be gone to in the last 5-10 minutes of a game, I think you need to be creating the chances to justify it, and we just weren't really doing that up until Acerbi's header right at the end.
Yeah, One of the questions we received from Greek Laziale is the 3-5-2 the right tactics for our current squad? I don't know. We saw Inzaghi finally changing a little bit. I think the secret will be with all this type of midfielder. Let's not forget Berisha that was injured, Milinkovic Savic, and so on. I think Lazio can. Sorry, I'm dying. Lazio can change tactics, change formation during the match, and switch in a 3-4-1-2 and different tactics.
Yeah, I'll take over while you die in the corner there.
Thanks.
I think, to answer the question, I think 3-5-2 is the right formation for Lazio to use as a foundation, as a platform, because that's what Inzaghi has drilled into this team for the last years since he took charge. It's very much the formation that he identified himself with, and that he's tried to drill it with the squad, and the squad's had great success playing in that formation. But yeah, I think that adaptability, that willingness to tinker with the squads and with the tactics during the game as well as between games is an extra string to your bow. I think that's as much of it's as much of a weapon really as bringing on a new player off the bench. If you've got a coach who's very flexible tactically and who knows how to exploit certain parts of the opposition. I think Inzaghi just needs to have a bit more confidence in himself during games. He definitely did in his first full season, and there are certain matches where he would make changes and they would work, and you'd think this guy is, he's turning into a once in a generation piece, this young, so inexperienced, and yet he's outsmarting guys who are, decades ahead of him in terms of how long they've been in the game. So I think by this point, he knows his squad so well, he knows the club. I think he needs to be, this season, doing more of that, restoring the idea of changing things up mid-match, maybe between games as well, smaller games in the Napoli group stages perhaps, and see how it goes. There's no harm in doing that.
Yeah, what I wanted to say before I was dying is that, especially this season, you have a lot of quality midfielder that can play in different positions. Cataldi is one example, Murcia is another one. Berisha can play instead of Leva, but can play even as Milinkovic Savic or Luis Alberto. We saw Luis Alberto playing a trequartista, then come back, play playmaker, and so on. So we saw even Cáceres. I want to talk about Cáceres because he played in the left midfielder Saturday, which was a new thing for Lazio. So you have all these players, and you can change formation during the match. Not only, but you can have Berisha moving around. You can start with a simple 3-5-2 and then having Berisha or Milinkovic Savic going up and play with a 3-4-3 for certain situation and so on. So, and it's quite difficult to block those type of tactics with players moving around. Honestly, I want to see it a little bit more. Yesterday we noticed something different, so I'm confident. I believe that this could be the season where we see this more.
Yeah, I was really encouraged by that because I think I'd almost given up hope of that happening, actually, simply because in pre-season we hadn't really seen Inzaghi do anything other than sticking with the 3-5-1-1. In the friendly matches, that's what he was going with. In the training matches, that's what he was going with. So for him to, midway through the second half in the opening game of the season, suddenly revert to a back four was... Yeah, it was a big surprise, and maybe the whole thing was intentional. Maybe it was a message to Ancelotti all along, was that he would have expected him not to bother changing tactics, and there he did. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the adaptability, flexibility of the players in the squad, you're absolutely right. That's something that he really needs to make the most of, because not only across the midfield, like you were saying, but also yesterday what he did was he moved Marisic further forward into a midfield, kind of attacking midfield position. And Cáceres went from left wing back to right back. And, there's only a certain amount of squads in this division where you have the players in a starting 11 who are capable of doing that. I mean, within that change, you had Cáceres moving to right back, you had Radu moving to left back, Marisic moving up to the right wing. And for none of these players, it's really too big of an issue to make those changes. So in defence and midfield, we've got real options there.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's a resource Lazio have, and we should be using that much more than we did last year. Alistair, a lot of questions, big surprise, are related to our defense. Vildas Glavas say we concede way too many goals. Can Inzaghi fix it? On how, if so, how to fix those blackout Inzaghi talk about after the game. Maybe we're going to talk about the Inzaghi press conference. I thought he wanted to defend the team and not talk about lack of condition of some of the players. It's true that the first goal, for people who didn't see the match, arrived just 1 minute after Radu came back from the head injury. So maybe he was a little bit not focused enough. But let's be honest, Napoli 3 minutes ago had other two chances. So, you can feel that Napoli was going to score sooner or later.
Yeah, I mean, we were screaming for half-time at that point, because within about 5 minutes you had cross that came, through the 6-yard box. Milik was inches away from scoring. You had Zielinski hit the crossbar. You had the goal that was then disallowed, and I think that took everyone in the stadium by surprise. I think everybody had kind of already realised it was, already accepted it was a Napoli goal, and then when the VAR overturned it, I think everybody was quite surprised and relieved. So you can't say there weren't warning signs that there was Napoli were in the ascendancy. And yeah, it's a bit of a cliche to say it's the worst time to score, but you could see that last night that it really is, because the team went down. They went into the tunnel at halftime with their heads down, because basically the last thing they did before the break was to concede a goal, and that is frustrating because they'd held out through a bit of an onslaught over that kind of 5-10 minute period. And actually, I think up until that point, Lazio had defended very well. I was so impressed with Acerbi. I still am impressed with Acerbi. I think it was a really promising start for him. I think he's replaced De Vrij very, very well, and I think he's only going to get better the more he plays there as well. I thought Luis Felipe had a very good first half. It was a shame that he picked up an injury. And yeah, you're right. Radu, was he concussed? Who knows? I mean, he just had his head smashed, taken off on a stretcher, bandaged up and run back on again. So I don't think it was a surprise to see the dangerous ball to Callaghan kind of come over his head. But defensively, on the whole, I wasn't too concerned about what I saw last night. I don't know if this is just me, I'm in the minority here, but I don't think defensively Lazio were too bad last night until the point at which Inzaghi made those changes and it became a back four. And that was the point at which it was really open. Everything was very fast and loose and ragged. But that was as a result of this formation change, which deviated from the main system. I think while we were playing the 3-5-2, things looked a lot more controlled than they have done in the past. And in my opinion, although I do like the idea of Inzaghi tinkering, I think he did it a bit too early.
I think it's not a problem of the four-man defense, is that we were playing with Vinikovic, Savic, Correa, Immobile and Luis Alberto together. So, that creates outbalance from midfield. And I agree with you. I thought Lazio struggled because Lazio midfield collapsed. They couldn't run anymore, and So Napoli was putting a lot of pressure on the defense. Honestly, I don't remember bad mistakes for defenders. It's simply that Napoli was holding the ball just outside Lazio's box, and so it was quite complicated for the defense to hold out. I think with a better midfield, Lazio would have achieved at least a point. And as you were saying, I thought Acerbi played really well. Ramos, I was really happy with him. I was surprised he went out. Nobody told us about the injury. And to be honest with you, even Bastos, when he came in, he made a great save at the last second, for example. I think he didn't play bad at all.
Yeah, he definitely deserves a mention. I mean, that's the thing. If you, like you've just done, if you go through the defence man by man, it's quite hard to criticise any of them individually for having a bad game. A couple of people picked up on individual errors for goals, but I think that overall the defence wasn't a problem. It's exactly what you pinpointed there, is the midfield being bypassed too easily. And I think individually the defenders did pretty well. It's Bastos come on, to be honest. I think having watched and tracked Lazio's progress through pre-season, where the favoured back three was always with Wallace alongside Acerbi and Radu, I think it was a bit of a surprise to see Bastos to be the one that came on. But you could quite quickly see why. I mean, while Bastos has got a lot more kind of pace and physicality to his game than Wallace does, and I think Inzaghi was probably aware that he might need that as Lazio pushed to get another goal. And like you said, the moment that he made that intervention, it was absolutely crucial. I mean, it was, what was it, a 4-on-2? It was some enormous advantage Napoli had on the counter-attack, and Bastos did superbly well in that moment to actually snuff out that danger. He made a decision, he committed himself, and it turned out to be the right decision. So I don't think he can be criticised, if I'm honest. And I know this was another question we've had, although I don't have it in front of me. I think the biggest concern defensively for me was actually further back. It was in goal with Strakosha, rather than with any of the defenders.
Why you didn't like Strakosha performance?
I thought that he was very lucky to see the VAR overturn the initial equaliser. That was very, very poor piece of goalkeeping for that goal. Another train?
Yeah. Train of disagreement, I would say, but go on.
I think everyone will be delighted to hear that you're back living in the train station. I think he did. That was a really bad piece of goalkeeping. I mean, it's what you hear all the time, really, isn't it? Is that if you're going to be stopping shots, you need to parry it away from goal, and he just flapped it straight back into the path of two Napoli players. Milik was there. I thought his distribution was an issue again. His kicking wasn't great, and it's encouraging now, though, to have some genuine competition for him in the shape of Proto, because Inzaghi does have a genuine other option now, which he didn't before. I'm not saying Strakosha should be dropped for his performance. I don't think it was that bad. I'm just saying that if I was to pinpoint someone in that defence that I thought underperformed, it would be Strakosha rather than defenders.
Well, I'm surprised. I didn't think Strakosha played badly, honestly, and I believe Lazio didn't lose for Strakosha. So, I was surprised from the question, but, football is not a perfect science. Everybody thinks it's different, and there's not the perfect solution. So, I don't think Strakosha is the problem, but as you were saying, Proto gives me a lot of confidence. So, I think he will play in Europe League, and so we'll be able to see how he will perform, and if he can really turn to be a challenge for Strakosha. But let's go with the tough questions that we receive. Paul McGuinness, why wasn't Alistair McKenzie wearing the new Lazio Lounge t-shirt?
One of us would have had to get changed. We can't turn up wearing the same clothes. It'd be embarrassing for both of us.
You didn't convince me.
No. Well, how many new listeners did you get us at the stadium with your T-shirt? Do you think?
I don't know. By the way, there were a lot of non-Italian fans at the stadium Saturday night. I wasn't able to talk with them, but guys, if you have friends going to the stadium, watch Lazio, or if you were one of them, subscribe to Lazio Lounge. We are the only podcast in English talking about Lazio weekly. So, if you want some more news, you know where to find us.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I do apologize for not being a walking sales pitch for the podcast last night, but it is what it is. I was having to look a little bit smarter, perhaps, and I wasn't quite sure what to wear for the. I was in the press box last night. I wasn't quite sure what to wear because I didn't want to look terrible, but at the same time, it was pretty hot. I know you weren't convinced it was very hot, but for me it was.
It was quite cold, to be honest with you.
Did you have a big jacket with you?
No, not that cold, but it wasn't August, to be honest. It didn't look like August. Alistair, I was thinking for Juventus Lazio, would you be happy to see a midfield with Badel and Leva playing together and sort of, big wall in front of the defense?
I don't think it's the worst idea. I think this team needs more balance. There needs to be a bit more better kind of connections between the different parts, the defense, the midfield and the attack. And I think the idea of putting Lucas beside Badel could be one way of doing that. But the only concern I would have is that they've just not been tested together before now. So to go to Turin next weekend, and I'm sure most people were aware of the circus around Ronaldo's debut yesterday. It'll be the same again next weekend because it'll be his first game at home for Juventus. That's going to be a crowd that's going to be extremely hungry for a win, and for a convincing win at that, with their new man on display. So I think going into that game cautiously isn't the worst idea. I don't think it's really in Inzaghi's nature, though, to set up defensively. And on the other hand, like I said, there's also the fact that they've not been tested together as a partnership yet. But on top of that as well, I mean, how do you set up that team? Because somebody's going to have to miss out. I mean, we kind of talked about this in a pre-season podcast, but would it be Parolo who'd miss out? Would it be, if it's a 3-4-2-1, would you put Milinkovic and Alberto behind Immobile and leave Parolo out of the team?
Yes, probably that would be my option. I think you have to see the condition of Milinkovic-Savic, because as we said before, if he's not able to play 90 minutes, then maybe he can come in the second half. But otherwise, I would be intrigued to see this type of formation. Badel and Leva, they are not just midfielder defenders. They are also playmaker, and we saw Badel with Juventus and Leva last year. So it's not a real defensive formation. They can do everything, but maybe give that extra coverage to the defense in a tough match. It will be even important to see who's playing on the sides. Will Lulic make his debut? Will Barisic play on the other side, or Basta? I think that can change really a lot how Lazio will play. But as we said before, Milinkovic gets really, really dangerous if he gets closer to the box. And with that type of tactic, he would be closer to the box, and Lazio maybe can be more dangerous with a team that should be more defensive.
Yeah, and the other thing is as well, by this point, Milinkovic is going to be a player who occupies defenders. You know, he's a known danger in Serie A now. So given his physical threat, I think if he's playing in a more advanced position, you've always got the option to go long. And one aspect of Lazio's game I liked in the first half hour yesterday, when we were, really in command of things, was the range of passing. We weren't afraid to mix it up. We'd play it out from the back on occasion, and other times we'd be willing to go long. And that's how the goal came about, was from a chair. I think it was bursting through the defence, a long ball to Immobile. I mean, he seemed to really not have anything on at the time, and it was his own, individual brilliance that saw that result in a goal. But you've got to give this guy chances. That was the only shot on target we had last night, and I think Immobile, he's the best, or at least one of the best strikers in this league. So we need to be making sure we're in the chain. Alberto and Milinkovic, you've got two guys who can do that. So I think the closer we can get them to him, the better.
Yeah, I thought, and this is another point, I thought Immobile was too alone yesterday. Often, when he had the ball, he was surrounded by Napoli defenders and no Lazio players were near him. Now, I think this is due to the poor condition of Luis Alberto and Milinkovic-Savic. So I hope this will improve. But I was a little bit concerned that maybe Inzaghi to give extra defense to their goalkeeper said to the team to play a little bit less attacking. I don't know. I think more on the first option, that Luis Alberto didn't have enough energy to play near to Ciro Immobile like the last year.
But do you know why? I mean, what reason is there for Alberto to be out of shape at this point? We've got Cáceres, Badel and Milinkovic have the excuse of having been at the World Cup, getting extended breaks. I thought Cáceres did look in decent shape last night, though. And then you've got various players who've struggled with certain injuries. But with Alberto, I don't think he, as far as I'm aware, really has an excuse for being below par with his condition.
As I said before, he spent the first 2 weeks probably of Alonso just recovering from the injury. So that's probably why he's a little bit behind in condition. I don't know if that's enough, but that's, what I believe.
It's still a long time, though. It's still a lot of pre-season and training to get ready for the game. But I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful that it's just a bad game. And look, we have to keep reminding ourselves it's week 1 of the season, and people do have bad games, and it doesn't always mean we have to read too much into it. It doesn't suddenly make Alberto a bad player that he didn't have a good game last night, and the same goes for Milinkovic. So, they might turn up next week in Turin and change the game and win the game for Lazio. So, well, let's hope so.
Yeah, even because Correa, it's a very interesting player. And the thing is, if Luis Alberto is not on form, still not have 100% condition, then you have Correa that is a very valid option. And this is a little bit what happened in the, I think against Arsenal in the friendly match. Luis Alberto didn't play very well, but when Correa came in, things changed. So, I don't know. We know that Inzaghi hasn't got problems of making this substitution, so we're going to see during the week if Luis Alberto find his form and play well against Juventus.
Yeah, and Alberto obviously had good competition for his place last season in Felipe Anderson. So, but he'd won that battle. It was clear he'd won that battle by the end of the season, and that he would be the first choice. So, hopefully, it is a good incentive for him, an extra motivation that now we've got got this new guy who's a direct competition for him for that spot. Obviously, Correa's capable of playing in various different positions in the forward line, and when he came on yesterday, he was playing on the left wing. So he's another useful one in terms of his versatility. But I would like to see him being given a chance if Alberto was to continue to struggle. I think it would be nice to see him get an opportunity.
By the way, I'm shocked. Djibril Cissé signed for Vicenza, third division team in Italy. I thought he had retired a couple of years ago.
Well, supposedly they have French owners who know him in some way. So he's been convinced by the French owners to join them. But are they not in Serie D, or it's still uncertain which league they're playing in next season? It's a strange situation.
Yeah, it's a strange situation, so it's not official, but where they're going to play. But Cissé, they announce it, so I really don't know what to say. I'm a little bit surprised. The other thing is, I want to say to Kilkito that couldn't go to the match because he had a motorbike accident. So that, we hope he recovers soon and can go back to Curva Nord where he has his subscription, even though he's not living in it. Subscription and annual ticket, season ticket, even though he's not living in Italy. I hope you hear our podcast as usual and you recover fast. Alistair, what else do we need to talk? What was the positive thing of this match? Because we said a lot about bad things, but
no, I definitely like to touch on positives. For me, when I was kind of rounding things up in my head after the match, in terms of things to be positive about, I think that, like I already touched on, Badel is going to be an excellent signing. And from what we saw in the first half an hour, I think that was enough evidence to see what he'll be able to do in this team and in that role. But, without doubt, he needs to improve his fitness. Acerbi as well. I think if you're looking at new signings, the fact that we had two new signings in that team last night and they both had good games, I think Acerbi was the most impressive. Probably one of the best players on the pitch for Lazio. I was really impressed with him. I think that he's got the right kind of anticipation. He's clearly comfortable with his feet. He doesn't rush into decisions. He can anticipate the game well, and clearly he's also a danger from set pieces, and so unlucky not to make his debut with a goal. So I think Acerbi for me was a big bonus, and on top of that, the obvious one, Ciro Immobile. If there was any doubts about him, which, you were talking about the negativity of some fans, well, it's crazy what people can read into pre-season, and the fact that Ciro's not been quite himself in friendly matches has already had some people doubting him, which is crazy. Well, that goal was incredible and shows what he can do just individually, and that's why I was saying before, he just needs the opportunities. And we need to be giving them to him. So, although we've gone through time and again the concerns about not having a valid backup for him, but as long as he's still on top of his game and he's fit, we're going to be very dangerous. And the final thing I would say, which is positive, we've already touched on, but was the fact that Inzaghi showed a willingness to be tactically flexible. Like I said already, I don't think he got it quite right yesterday. I think he maybe did it a bit too early and the team wasn't quite prepared enough. But it's a good indication, it's a promising indication that over the next season he's going to be able to tinker with things a bit more in matches instead of just relying on the same old strategy.
Yeah, I think Ciro Immobile's goal, I saw it again. It's simply amazing. What he does. He was alone with three defenders and he was amazing. So, yeah, you're right. One thing I want to talk about is yesterday I had a guy 2 rows behind me that from the first minute till the last didn't stop criticizing player. Luis Alberto had the ball. Luis Alberto, he's rubbish, he's terrible. Milinkovic Savic took the ball. 150 million, he's rubbish. How can we have a player like that? He didn't save anybody. He was awful, and it's really sad to see this type of fans around Lazio. Unfortunately, he wasn't the only one. We know that Lazio fans are usually very critical, especially in some situation. Luckily, it's not the big part, but when things start going bad, it's very easy to do it. So again, as I said, it was against Napoli, who arrived second last year. Now we're playing against Juventus. So even if Lazio arrived to the third day of the season with 0 points, it's still not enough to push the panic button. I mean, starting playing against Juventus and Napoli, it's very tough. Seeing even the other matches, Roma was really lucky to win. Inter lost against Sassuolo. So the Serie A, it's a very difficult league. Every team would struggle here. So again, we have to take the positive things, and as you were saying, Ciro Immobile was great. Badel, till he was able to run, was good. Acerbi, he played well. I was impressed by Bastos and Ramos. So there are a lot of positive things. Marusic, I think he's still he's not in the condition we saw him last year, and he's a big body, so he needs time to get fit, to recover from the stress, the hard working of the summer training. So he's going to take time. But let's not forget that Lazio will recover a lot of players, hopefully against Juventus. Maybe even Berisha would be able. So we're going to see a brand new team, and hopefully a team that plays better than this match.
Yeah, and a word for Radu as well, quickly. I think he started the season and really, peak Radu. He was starting fights, going off on a stretcher and running back on with a bloodied head bandage, and he's a great character, and I was delighted to see him, returning back to his old tricks, really doing exactly what he always does. So hopefully we get another good season out of him.
Yes, he's really good. We saw improvement since Inzaghi became the manager of Lazio, and he's playing so well. I believe this season would be the same. Especially, I think maybe with Acerbi, the two can work even better than with De Vrij. I don't know, because Acerbi is a little bit faster and maybe more leader, maybe more someone that can command the rest of the team. So I'm really curious.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see what happened.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what kind of impact Cherby has on the defence. In a leadership sense, definitely, because De Vrij, for all his qualities, he definitely brought a calmness to that defence. But I think De Vrij probably led more by example than by natural leadership abilities. Whereas Acerbi does strike me as more of a vocal presence. So hopefully that can have a positive impact on that defence in an organisational sense, because there's a lot of nervous individuals who are capable of making errors in that back line. So I think if we have somebody who can be beside them, screaming at them and setting them straight, that would be definitely a positive.
Yes, and let's not forget that of the new signing, only two played from the beginning Saturday. So there's still plenty of new players that Lazio have to test, starting from Berisha and Durmisi. Honestly, I thought Durmisi would have played a little bit yesterday. I was surprised he didn't, but again, injury had to force Inzaghi to make some of the decision. So I believe he's going to be playing in the coming weeks. But again, I think Lazio has a lot of options, and hopefully Inzaghi will be able to find the right solution for the coming matches.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the point you made already, which is a very valid one. You know, Lazio, it's worth remembering, Lazio are going into both of these games as underdogs, quite big underdogs. And so you're right, to get to week 3 with 0 points, it's not ideal. We all know that. It's not what we hope for. It's not what we expect. But it's also not the end of any objectives. It's not the justification of people who've written this team off in pre-season. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that Lazio have come up against better teams in the opening 2 weeks, and that's all it can be. Obviously, week 3 at home to Frosinone, that's a game that you have to win. That's much more important in terms of seeing where this team is at in a way. These early tests, I think it would be a massive bonus to get something out of them. And I thought last night the Lazio would be capable of getting a draw, and that was my pre-match prediction, but they fell short. And from what we've seen in the Chievo-Juve game yesterday, from what we've seen with Lazio playing in Turin last year and the Super Cup, there's no reason to believe that Lazio can't get a result next weekend. There's no reason not to be confident about it, but please just everybody try and keep things in perspective. And if we are beaten by Juventus in Turin, it's not suddenly the end of the season.
No, it's probably the beginning of the season, because after that, Lazio will finally have much easier matches and time even to bring in the new players. And we still don't know the draw of Europe League. I think that will be very important to test youngsters and new players. Alistair, I think we can wrap it up here. If you have maybe some interesting stats this time.
I'm afraid I don't on me because I'm having to do this on my phone tonight, and I did actually get sent something by Rami, but I've lost it because it's on my laptop. So I'm sorry, it's a shocking absence tonight.
Well, maybe we can do better next week. Thank you again, Alistair, and I hope you find finally the Wi-Fi for your new home. And remember, everybody, you can subscribe to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. You can subscribe and rate us on iTunes. Please rate us so our podcast will become more popular and visible to other football fans. If you know fans of Serie A or Lazio, please suggest them to listen to our podcast. Again, you can find us on Spreaker, on Spotify, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Alistair, and talk to you next week, probably.
Come on, you eagles, there's no time to fear. Up there's an angel watching